And welcome to another edition of the College Pride Press Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brad Kruppel, and we have a potpourri of off-season news and notes to talk about. We're going to do some recruiting talk and a few other topics that we want to hit on now that we have some extra time in the off-season. So loaded crowd here tonight with the podcast, and I'll let everyone kind of introduce themselves, and we'll start off with Sean and what's going on with him with his opening statement and intro.
All right, what's going on, college basketball fans? Sean Bach here. Hope you guys been enjoying the summer, the dull summer that is college basketball with really nothing going on. But lately it's been picking up with all the recruiting stuff. So we'll hit you up with some of that today, and hope you guys enjoy the podcast.
I wasn't sure whether you said dull or doll there, and that's our transition. Ryan Dahlkamp.
Ryan Dahlkamp, Indiana University. Well, the summer's been going all right. It's been dragging along, and but it's got a little bit more exciting here the last few days with our boy King Archie starting to take over the recruiting trail. So I'm excited to get back into college basketball here.
All right, and we'll wrap it up with Duncan. What's going on with you?
Also, Indiana coming back on the pod, and I'm just going to echo Ryan's sentiment there. You know, it was after the immediate happiness of Archie coming on to IU. It was a lot of wondering who would be the first to come, who would be the first recruit to commit, and a lot of just kind of anxiousness, I think, on the Indiana fan base. I was amongst that. But, as the 76ers like to say, you trust the process. And, within 48 hours, you get 3 top 100 commits. And so that's that's what's got me excited. Monday, sit at my desk. It's like someone else committed and another person committed. It was a great sitting there, throwing texts back and forth and seeing all those guys commit and being the true core for the first class of Archie Miller. So looking forward to seeing those guys develop and hopefully lead IU to a 6 banner.
All right, and Ryan and Duncan mentioned it, so let's start off right there. Obviously, the big news of the past few weeks, IU and Archie Miller landing 3 top 100 players in the span of about 20 hours. So let's start kind of breaking down those 3 guys. We got Race Thompson, a power forward from Minnesota, who actually will reclassify and spend the next year redshirting and working out with the team in Bloomington. And then Jerome Hunter, a small forward, power forward from Pickerington, Ohio, who is a 4-star. And finally, Demezy Anderson from South Bend, who is a, shooting guard, small forward, 6'6" shooter. First player from Northern Indiana to play at IU since the great Grant Gilon, who has moved on. So, those 3 guys really getting a nice start off for the recruiting scene for Archie Miller. So let's dive right into it. Sean, what are your thoughts on kind of the 3 commits and Archie Miller's recruiting thus far?
Well, obviously yesterday, whenever it was, Monday was probably the craziest 24-hour period that Indiana basketball has had since last year. Really, it's just like Duncan said, it's almost like a relief to see all these guys start coming in, and really this inside-outside recruiting approach that Archie Miller promised to the Indiana fan base and what he'd bring to the program. Obviously, with Race Thompson from Minnesota, it was big getting him out of that state because his father was a running back at Minnesota back in the 90s or 80s or whatever, and really, it's nice to get him. He's a bruiser, big bruiser inside, prefers to play inside rather than out, which is something that IU really needs down low with Colin Hartman leaving next year or after this year, excuse me. And then Jerome Hunter, too, he's kind of a stretch for, and same thing with Demezy Anderson, who's a great shooter from the outside. So it's nice to see Archie get these guys and starting to bring them in, hopefully to get some momentum, as guys have been saying. Get some momentum for the rest of the summer and hopefully get a couple more scholarships and get that guy from New Albany, Indiana.
I'll toss it to Ryan here. What do you think the impact of Race Thompson reclassifying and then redshirting is going to be on his career and his profile in college as well as the team?
Well, we've kind of been talking about it in our group message that we all thought Race would be the first guy to commit and that he would be a really solid first guy to get to kind of fill that front court void. But the news of him reclassifying to 2017 and redshirting, I think he's going to be able to develop a lot better, like in terms of the way that Archie would want him to develop, being there instead of playing another year of high school basketball. I think being getting a lot of exposure to the team and basically doing everything with the team except for playing, I think is going to be huge. And I think, as he said, he'd like to hit the ground running in 2018, and it's going to be huge for us.
All right, we'll go to Duncan. What are your thoughts on Jerome Hunter, Demezy Anderson, and if you want to talk about Race Thompson, feel free to throw in your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, going just off of that on Race really quick, I think that that first year at school can't be understated. You see a guy like Ethan Happ; he's kind of the model. At this point, he got to sit behind Frank Kaminsky for a year, develop at Wisconsin, and then has developed into one of the best centers in the country. And when he's been the starter there, even if he does get a little liberal with that third step, but I'll let that slide. I think that Race is going to be a good. I mean, he's had some injury issues of late, so I think that this year will allow him to develop with Cliff Marshall, and then as well as get healthy, and he'll be able to hit the ground running, similar to what Ethan Happ has done. I think that Jerome Hunter, I think that was, one of those commits that I really hadn't thought that he was going to be this early in the process, and seeing him come in. And initial relationship with Archie from Dayton, I think that only helped it. And then on top of that, I think the thing that stunned me the most is that Demezy Anderson is the first top 100 Indiana commit since James Blackman Jr. So it kind of just tells you how Indiana had transitioned away from locking down the state, missing out on a guy like Chris Wilkes and Paul Scruggs. When you can't lock down your borders like that, especially in a basketball-rich state like Indiana, it's like Texas, like the University of Texas in football, like University of Florida or Florida State in football as well. If you can't lock down those borders and you're in a state that lives and breathes basketball, that's only going to be bad. And every year you always see it. A guy from Indy or a guy from the state of Indiana is a vital player on a Final Four team. And I think that Demezy Anderson has the capability to be a great role player, a great third scorer for IU on their next on the next IU team that makes a deep run in the NCAA tournament, whether that's his freshman year or after that.
All right, now looking at this roster here, you had, once these guys kind of get eligible, you'll have Juwan Morgan, Justin Smith, Clifton Moore, and then you'll add these kind of wing players. How do you think this is going to work out in terms of fitting everyone in and, whether everyone's going to be happy with kind of their playing time and the work that they're receiving from Archie Miller? Sean, can you talk to a little bit about how that's going to play out?
Well, obviously just all these guys together puts in more bodies, but you're right. These guys come to IU because they expect to play, and they expect to play a lot, and that's based on their rankings and how good they've been during their high school and AAU career. Obviously, Demezy and Jerome, they're a little more perimeter-oriented, like I said earlier, so that'll be interesting because, same thing with Clifton Moore. He's a little more perimeter-oriented rather than Smith and Durham, but that's an interesting question because, like I said, it's more bodies and it doesn't hurt to have a lot more guys. But the big question is going to be playing time, and I think Archie's going to find a way to really work that out. I don't really know. It kind of depends on these freshmen, sophomore year, how they play, and who knows? Maybe we could see a transfer or two or something like that. But really, it's up in the air. But I feel like Archie's going to find a way to figure something out.
Well, it's already a stacked forward class, and Archie Miller is still on the trail. He offered Aaron Henry from Indianapolis, who's also kind of a wing player. Ryan, what are your thoughts on Henry, and do you think that these commitments are going to affect his decision?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting because we were talking about how that offer that Archie made to him on, I think, Monday night kind of maybe pushed those other guys, Jerome and Demezy, to commit, because he knew that he was pursuing more wing players, so that ended up working out. But then Aaron Henry kind of gave a weird quote about how he was going to push his decision back a few months, which so I'm not really sure like on that. But I mean, Aaron Henry, like the thing with all these wings is, yeah, there's a lot of them, but I think they all have different like roles and styles that they can play together at the same time rather than just all being behind each other. And with Aaron Henry, I think he's just a guy that not really highly ranked, but he's an Indiana kid, and he's a tough-minded player, and he'll do it all for you if you have to. And I always think those glue type of guys, you can never have too many of them. So I like to see what happens going forward with him.
Yeah, a lot of people that have watched him, I haven't gotten the chance to, unfortunately, have said that Henry this past year really developed well. And then, I mean, he plays with Ben Davis in Indianapolis and led them to the 4A state title. And it sounded like from the teams that he played, it wasn't like he was playing the Sisters of the Poor, and that he was really the genesis for that Ben Davis team getting to the state title and then winning it. So you see guys like Jeff Rabjohns who are really high on the development he's had just from his junior year and into his senior year. He's played well in the AAU and EYBL circuit versus a guy like Robert Finney who struggled a little bit. I still would like to see Robert Finney suit up in the candy stripes, but I was kind of getting a little tentative about keep handing out scholarships, but then you realize IU still has 3 scholarships for that for this 2018 class. So that's one for a point guard, whether that be Darius Garland or Robert Finney or one of these other guys like a Kinjo who they just offered tonight, and then additionally Romeo Langford if he wants to come. That I think he'll have an open scholarship. It's just a matter of if he takes it. From that standpoint, I don't think IU is really going to be hurting for scholarships. I honestly would not be shocked to see Archie even hold on to kind of flatten out the structure of the roster point, or give it to or look for a grad transfer in the upcoming grad transfer market following this season. So I think there's still a lot of different variables at play, but I would not mind if it ends up being where Aaron Henry where Austin Henry decides to accept that offer. I would be excited because I think that he could be a good player coming from the city of Indianapolis and being an Indiana kid.
Yeah, one last point on IU before we kind of move on to other schools. But, Robert Johnson, Josh Newkirk are going to be graduating. Al Durham, Curtis Jones, and Devontae Green will still be there. But none of those guys really have that true point guard kind of feel that you really need to have success in the tournament and in the Big Ten. What are your I know Duncan mentioned a few of the guards. What are your thoughts on kind of some of these guards that IU is getting and whether we could see a name kind of come out of the blue? I know they've offered a few guys in the last few days. So we'll go to Dahl. What are your thoughts on kind of the point guard situation on this recruiting trail for 2018?
Well, I mean, we've all kind of for a while now. I think we think Rob Finney's going to end up committing, which I hope is still the case. Even though he struggled, I think that Archie still showed interest in him, and that should show a lot to Robert in making his decision. But I just think the way his style of play, I think he fit in really well at IU, and I think that we definitely probably need a point guard in this 2018 class. Not necessarily to come in and play right away, but someone to learn behind Devontae Green or Al Durham, depending on whoever they put in the point guard. But someone that can play backup minutes for a year or two and then be ready to go as an upperclassman. And I think Robert Finney in particular is that type of guy. And we've talked about how maybe IU's kind of slipping on Darius Garland. And Brad, I know you say he's going to go to Duke. We'll see what happens there. But there's a couple other options out there. David Duke, he likes IU, and I think the staff really likes him. But we'll see how the point guards play out. It'll be interesting, and I think maybe in the next month or so we'll get a better idea on how that picture is going to unfold.
All right, real quick, Sean. Prediction. IU is going to get 1 point guard in this class. Who's it going to be?
I mean, I hope it's Robert Finney. Like you got, I agree with you guys. I'd rather have a point guard, a 4-year point guard who can build up a program than a 1-year guy who's going to be in and out just like that. So, I mean, I hope it's Robert Finney, and I think that's going to be it in the end.
All right, that's great. So we're going to move on from Indiana University, which is in Bloomington, to a high school student that is in Bloomington as well. Musa Jallow just recently committed to Ohio State, and Chris Holtman, and then reclassified to the 2017 class. So he will be playing this winter. We'll go to Duncan. What are your thoughts on Jallow making that move to Ohio State and Chris Holtman kind of building up that program again?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting situation. Time, at least around Indiana circles, Musa Jallow kind of came to a lot of the frustration with the fan base of in-state kids that necessarily sold on coming to Indiana. As a guy offer from Tom Crean, and I think he was going to be a target of Crean's staff if they stayed. But with the new staff, with Archie, Ed Schilling et al., it sounded like the focus turned elsewhere to guys like Demezy Anderson, like Jerome Hunter. And from that standpoint, it sounded like with their in heart and their change in focus, Musa also started to look other places, but it didn't sound like Indiana team. Virginia was rumored to be in there. They didn't really step up in the spring. There's another one that we saw. Recruiting stepped back of late. So it was kind of an interesting situation. Not only Musa commit early in the process, but then reclassify to that 2017. It honestly makes you think that maybe he was scared of seeing his stock drop anymore and wanted to make a move when he had the chance. But it will be interesting to see how he develops. He had played well against guys like Romeo Langford, watching the highlights of that and them battling back and forth this past year. And I think Musa could be a good player, but it is a little, an eyebrow raise as to why these schools started to step back. It wasn't just IU, it was these other schools as well. So it'll be interesting to see, what type of impact he has for the Buckeyes, because they're struggling for talent. Especially in the guard position. So you could see him handling the ball a little bit in this upcoming season in Chris Holtman's first year. I think it'll be interesting to see how Holtman uses him. But it will be interesting to see how he turns out because IU is on him and then step back. And then I know that I'm not going to pretend to know Musa, but I think that anybody that would come back home, he would be ready to play against the Hoosiers. So it would be hopefully for his sake he plays well and then comes back to IU and battles with Jerome Hunter and Race Thompson and all these guys, and we get a good game.
Yeah, his recruitment's been very rare in that a lot of schools had offered and then some backed off. But Chris Holtman, very familiar with the Indiana area, just left the Butler job. So he's been kind of picking off some of those Indiana State recruits. Ryan, what were your thoughts on Jallow and him moving to Ohio State?
Well, as Duncan kind of mentioned, the IU staff kind of backed off of Musa Jallow, and that was kind of shocking for a lot of Indiana fans just because he's from Bloomington, so they feel like he should be easy to get to play at IU, but I guess that obviously wasn't the case. But Musa was one of those guys that was really athletic, and you could see that he had potential. So he got a bunch of offers earlier in his high school career, but banking on him eventually panning out. But then a lot of these schools kind of backed off him, like Duncan was saying, because he was struggling and he wasn't making that progression like he was predicted to. But Chris Holtman, great job. Kudos to him for sticking with him and swooping in and taking a gamble on a guy that has some upside.
Sean, do you have any thoughts here before we move on?
Well, I'd just like to point out that it's going to be a huge transition for Jallow. Obviously, he's playing with the Team Blaze out of Indiana, and he's actually finishing up this AAU season with that team. and then going to Ohio State in August. So it's going to be a huge transition from playing with guys like smaller than him and maybe even a little bit younger than him in the same age to guys a lot bigger than him and a lot older. So we'll see how that transition pans out right away.
All right, great thoughts there. So next thing I want to talk about, five-star Reggie Perry in the class of 2018 committed to Mississippi State. Kind of a shock, but kind of not a shock. Ben Holland has been raking in recruits there. What are your thoughts on Mississippi State and Ben Holland, who keeps raking in recruits yet doesn't seem to show the results on the court? We'll go back to Sean real quick.
Well, I mean, Reggie Perry obviously decommitted from Arkansas. The big reason why he wanted to come to Mississippi State was he was closer to home with his father for health issues or something like that. But yeah, I mean, Mississippi State, we've seen a couple of their recruits fall off, including Mario Kegler and Malik Newman. They came for their freshman year and then transferred away. And then they bring in Nick Witherspoon too, who's going to be a solid player, who was ranked 27th overall by 24/7. So I mean, they got some solid targets coming in the 2018 class as well. But I mean, this Mississippi State program, I don't know. It's funny because we see it seems to be a common trend with some of these schools bringing in top talent, but they can't really produce. So I mean, maybe if these two classes don't really come around, then we could be seeing a possible firing of Holland. Who knows?
I mean, it's been 4 recruiting classes in a row that Holland has brought in premier talent, and the SEC is very top heavy with Kentucky, and then after that, it's really kind of a crapshoot as to who's in there kind of fighting with them. Duncan, what are your thoughts on Ben Holland, Stark Vegas, and Mississippi State?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting situation. Obviously Mississippi State is an SEC school. Football is the much bigger focus there. But Ben Holland's been able to recruit at a high level, similar to what he was able to do when he had back-to-back Final Fours at UCLA. But unfortunately for him, it hasn't been the same success rate that he had when he was in Los Angeles. So it's been interesting to watch from afar. I know that Mississippi State fans also thought they were going to swoop in and get Deron Davis at the last minute last year. That didn't happen. And honestly, for Deron, it probably was a good thing because just seeing guys like Mario Kegler, the latest example this year, go move out and leave after their freshman year, it's interesting. And I don't really know what the disconnect is between Ben Holland and the players, why they want to go there and then leave. But it's an interesting situation. I mean, you can kind of just look up a couple states north of Missouri, picking up Michael Porter Jr. and potentially John Tay, as well as some other high-level talent this year. That's going to be a great comparison to see, a school that was struggling, get some 5-star talent and see what kind of impact those guys can have. But I think that, if you don't start to see the results, would Mississippi State really want to pay the high salary they're probably paying Ben Holland if they're not going to receive the results, especially at a football school when you can pay a guy on the cheap that can do at least what Ben Holland is doing without the negative publicity for the transfers. So I think that Ben Holland is definitely on the hot seat from a coaching standpoint. And if you see more guys transfer, if you see the team not making the NCAA tournament, not really being competitive in the SEC, I think that you can only point the finger at Ben Holland and say, thanks, but this experiment is over.
Yeah, Ryan, tell me, how is this Ben Holland recruiting pitch getting across to these recruits? The team's stunk. It's not a very nice town or facilities for basketball, and all the guys that have gone there that have had talent the past few years have transferred. I mean, Blake Newman, Mario Kegler are the 2 big guys, and the rest of their top recruits have kind of, taken a step back and really didn't look too good in their first couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Mississippi State's just like, I don't know why anyone would want to play basketball there. But when I saw that Perry had committed to Mississippi State, I was just kind of scratching my head. I was like, well, the Malik Newman experiment didn't work out. Mario Kegler experiment didn't work out. I'm like, what does this guy see that is is making him feel optimistic about this, because I think I saw a tweet. Someone said, like, I wonder where Reggie Perry is going to commit to next year after he transfers. And I was like, this is a very valid point here, because I don't like, he'll probably be a one and done, or that's what I'm expecting. But like, like, Ben Holland's a fraud to begin with. So I mean, like, that's a whole nother conversation. But I mean, this is really just, it's not going to be anything, because Mississippi State's still going to suck at basketball.
Yeah, and all the Mississippi State fans are going to crawl into your mentions after watching this podcast, I'm sure.
Yeah,
all 5 of their diehard fans.
Yeah, I'd love to get into it with their entire
I still have some beef with some of those people after the Deron Davis thing, when Alex Bozich was calling them out.
They never had a shot at
I don't know
Davis.
I don't know if you know this, but Dak Prescott is the starting quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys.
Come on, man.
State. So I don't know really how that factors into basketball, but he did go there. People forget that.
Well, I think the more relevant Mississippi State topic for this podcast is their women's team.
The women's team is pretty good.
Did they win that SB?
Oh, I have no idea, but Final Four. So I mean,
that's your first problem, is you're watching the SB, Sean.
Yeah.
You wanted to see if Rory Markkinen won any awards.
Either him or Bam Adebayo for best draft pick.
Oh my God! Don't even get us started on that.
Oh wow, this podcast is off the rails. All right, going from Bam Adebayo to someone who actually does have talent, Marvin Bagley, who is the #1 player in the class of 2018, is considering reclassifying and coming to college right now. USC and Duke are the 2 schools that are rumored to be in the running for that. You know, what are your thoughts? Do you think he's going to reclass, and do you think it's a good move, and where do you think he'll end up? We'll start off with Sean.
All I've been seeing is that he wants to reclass because, I mean, there's money to be made, and he wants it as soon as possible. But Marvin Bagley Sr., who many refer to as LeVar Ball Jr., he's pretty crazy. He told reporters about the possible reclassification. He goes, "Why don't you ask CBS Sports? They're the ones that are reporting him to be reclassifying." So basically saying that there's no way that he said anything about him possibly reclassifying or anything. Like, it just came out of nowhere. But obviously I think he wants to, and he'll be an absolute stud wherever he ends up. But if he does end up reclassifying, 2 of his top schools, USC and Arizona, are going to have to find ways to accommodate him, because they already had the 13 scholarship offer limit for the 27-18 season. So many people are saying the fingers are pointing at Duke at this point, which is probably pretty true, but we'll see. I mean, I could see him reclassifying if he's up for it.
Marcus Bolden and Marvin Bagley in the same front court. Wow. Wow, revolutionary. All right, Ryan, what are your thoughts on Bagley's interesting roller coaster recruitment?
Well, I think it was Jay Billis who said on the NBA draft broadcast this year that Marvin Bagley would be the #1 pick in this past draft, and I agree with that. I mean, Brad, me and you saw him for a little bit at the EYBL event, and I think that particular game we saw him, he put up like 28 and 20, and like, he just is a man among boys out there. And as far as his reclass, I mean, he definitely should reclass, because like, there's no reason to play inferior high school competition. Like, he needs to get to the next level as quick as he can, because I mean, as long as he stays healthy, he's the #1 pick in whatever draft he's going in. And I mean, he's being compared to, like, not compared to LeBron, but like the most dominant, like, imposing high school prospect since LeBron. And someone like that, he just needs to get into the league as soon as he can.
I heard he's the most dominant high school player since Harry Giles.
Oh, yeah, Harry
Brad
Giles
Siegel.
and his 2 ACL injuries.
All right, Duncan, what are your thoughts on Marvin Bagley, and do you think he would get picked ahead of Michael Porter if they were in the same draft?
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. There's a guy in Columbia, Missouri, that might have something to say about who's going to be the #1 pick in this draft, and hopefully my Hawks are holding it, because that means that I will be the first person standing in line at Phillips Arena to buy my Michael Porter jersey. But that being said, I mean, Bagley is an incredible player. The latest I'm hearing is that he was going to head to Durham for a couple days here this week and kind of explore Durham a little bit more. Coach K is a great recruiter. He's a great coach, obviously, and if he can pull this off, more power to him. And I think it would put Duke back into that conversation with Arizona for me for preseason number one. But the fact that Andy Enfield has turned the USC program around. I think I was one of many who was skeptical to see him get that big dollar deal after that one great year at Florida Gulf Coast. And, the USC around, and I mean, USC was a good team this year. They'll be a good team this upcoming year. And if they can somehow get Marvin Bagley into that team, I think you have to have them as a Final Four contender. So wherever he does end up, it vaults that team into the next echelon of competition. And go to USC because it's Duke. But I think that if you can just skip that last year and sacrifice that year and go and you will get to the NBA obviously a year quicker, and it kind of touches on the NBA problem that we discussed in the draft pod about whether or not we need to look at that rule again. But I think that I think that all the wins are pointing to Duke, and if so, watch out because the Blue Devils would be my pick to win the ACC, and then definitely a Final Four contender if that was the case.
Yeah, I think it'd be safe to say that Duke would be back if they had
officially back.
Officially,
but
the one thing I wanted to open up here, what are really the downsides of him moving to the class? I mean, he's going to be a one and done. He's going to be like a top 3 pick no matter what. I mean, really, what are the downsides of reclassifying? I really don't think it's a debate. I think it's just he should just go out and do it if you have that option.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
Well, I mean, it was just like I was saying, there's no reason for him to play a high school level competition. He's clearly the best player on any court he'll step on in AAU or high school games. But and I just think he's definitely his body is physically ready for the NBA now. So I think, like you said, it's no question.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the biggest downside is a personal one. I mean, I think that Sean's just came through it. Obviously, Dahl and Brad and I have all done it. Your senior year of high school is one of those years where you start to develop yourself as a real person, and losing out on that. Personally, I mean, I know that year helped me a lot just as becoming a person. Someone that can actually be a functional adult in society that doesn't rely on my parents 99% of the time. And I think that, one of the little things we forget is that when you have these 18, 19, 20-year-olds going in the NBA, you're on the road constantly. And if you're not mature enough to handle that, you're going to fall by the wayside because the NBA isn't going to wait. Because there's a new crop every year of young guys that are cheaper than you that the NBA is going to be more willing to give a shot to, and especially with the two-way contracts and the expansion of the G League that I think is coming very soon. If you aren't mature enough to handle the day in day out grind of the NBA, then they're going to say thanks for playing, we'll see you later, and then you end up in Europe or you end up in China or somewhere. So I think that the biggest drop off wouldn't be basketball wise. I think we can all agree that Marvin Bagley is the guy would be successful in college this year, next year, whatever year. But I think it would be personally just him becoming a man and then playing in the NBA, being able to handle the lifestyle that comes with playing in the NBA.
See, I see your point, but also I think he's been expected to be a star in the NBA for the past since he was born, basically. And stepped on to a basketball court. So I don't think it's really unexpected stardom for him. So he's going to go to the NBA. And I think, part of it is getting the right support system around you, whether you're 22 years old coming out of college or, whether you go right out of high school, which some guys have done in the past.
That's fair.
Can we talk about how if Marvin Bagley goes to USC, I think Tony's just going to change his Twitter to the official hype train of USC basketball.
Hashtag fight on.
It's actually hashtag Trojan Fury.
Oh, excuse me.
That's going to be Tony Patelis' new favorite hashtag.
How fast would this national championship potentially be taken back quicker, or would it take longer than the Reggie Bush Heisman?
That's a good question. Yeah, embrace
debate. Had took to part my take.
All right, Sean, do you have any last Marvin Bagley thoughts before we move on to our next topic?
No, I think we're ready to go for the next one.
All right. So next thing I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit, we're going to do a little scheduling talk, but before that, one of the hot topics that many people have talked about is USA basketball and how that's affected recruiting in terms of, who's coaching the teams, who's working with the players, and who's kind of got contact with those players. And I think that it's had both a positive and negative effect for some coaches. I know Sean and Ryan had some very heated takes, so I'll just kind of let them take over and kind of talk about the USA basketball recruiting discussion. We'll let Dahl start off.
Well, I mean, it's just the fact that Calipari has he almost has dibs on like the top whatever guys that are the high school players. I mean, but what was interesting is I expected, because speaking like in terms of just Romeo Langford and that recruitment, like I expected this to be like, oh well, Cal's gonna have the in with Romeo, but it's interesting. We hear that Kentucky is actually not one of his like soft top threes or whatever they were saying, which that kind of interesting. But on the other hand, like a guy like Lewis King, where I guess Calipari's made like a good connection with him, and he has that like just at his disposal, which is just something that no other program really has. But I don't know. It's just kind of weird with the whole how that's all set up and how a current college basketball coach is the head coach of that team. And I mean, I guess it has its positive and negatives, maybe more negatives than positives, but I mean, it is what it is.
I think the one thing is everyone talked about positives and how they have contact with these guys and they're coaching them and kind of kissing up to them and working with them. But I think the past 3 years we've seen that there are some negatives to that. I mean, you said Romeo Langford's cooled off with Duke. He went over all the way to Egypt for that USA basketball tournament and barely played, according to reports. And a few years ago, TJ was committed. He was verbally committed to Arizona. And Sean Miller decided to take a college player instead of TJ Leaf. And Leaf then decommitted and went to UCLA and went to a rival school because he was mad that he didn't make that USA basketball team. So, we'll kind of see it. I think, Calipari, from the videos I saw, was really hyping up Hamidou Diallo and was also like poo-pooing Bol in the workouts, which I thought was pretty funny. He had like the whole team like clapping for Bol when he made a shot. So I thought that was pretty funny. So there's positives and negatives to that. So I know Sean's more versed in recruiting if he wants to touch on that.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't like how – I mean, I'm a little biased because I'm not the biggest Cal fan. I mean, I respect what he does. Like, he's a great recruiter, decent coach. But, I mean, I just don't appreciate how he has the ins on all these guys and how he basically gets to decide who gets to stay, and he can bring 4 of his, like, most potent targets that he wants and can put them on the USA team to build a greater relationship with them. I'm not sure if that was his motive behind it, but I'm sure it has to do a little bit with the decision-making process. But, I mean, as a whole, I mean, there's really no way to fix this, I would say, issue, in my opinion, as having a college coach coaching it. I mean, you could have an NBA guy, but, I mean, I don't really know the whole ins and outs of the rules and all that. So I guess it is what it is at this point.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sean. You look at a guy like Shaka Smart at Texas. Coach K at Duke, Jim Boeheim at Syracuse. These are all guys, in addition to Cal, These are all guys that coach Team USA basketball that get to talk to these guys, when they jump into the program and into that USA basketball program and really do get that extra time it's not really recruiting, but you could easily argue that being in practice with a coach is more beneficial than sitting in your living room and asking them, what is my life going to be like at Syracuse or Duke or Texas? For me, I think that you'd have to go with NBA, and I think you might see that change a little bit with Pop now that he's going to be the head coach of the USA basketball program. I just think that with the college coaches, how the NCAA doesn't see the clear violation of extra recruiting time kind of baffles me. But then again, should I really be baffled that the NCAA isn't acting on something that it seems obvious to everyone else? But from that standpoint, obviously we aren't in those conversations with Team USA. We're not reaching out to potential coaches who could be interested in that sort of thing. So we don't know. And that being said, if Archie Miller was announced as an assistant coach or head coach of a USA basketball program, I would be right up front being like, yeah, it's awesome. But it's one of those things where I think it's pretty clear that there's this extra recruiting leg that you get on a player, and that it probably should change. But I think it would have to come from the NCAA or inside USA basketball, and I'm not 100%. I'm not really that confident in either of those sides making that big change.
Yeah, I think that's true. Dahl, do you have one final point before we move on to scheduling stuff?
Yeah, I was just gonna throw in another one of the positives that came out. It was, or not like a overall positive, but for Shaka Smart, how that was the reason he got Mo Bamba, was that the relationship he developed with him for USA basketball from last year, I think it was.
I thought he got Mo Bamba because of Bamba's brother.
Yeah. Yeah, he did his best to help that situation out.
I totally forgot about that. That was a thing for like a day.
All right,
I still don't understand that.
All right, so next up we're going to talk about conference scheduling, and then a few coaches in the ACC and Big Ten have mentioned that they are preparing to play bigger conference schedules in the next few years as they kind of get their non-conference schedules together. They are anticipating having a longer season. So, what are your thoughts on both an extended a conference season that kind of rolls into December and how that might affect non-conference play? We'll start off with Duncan.
Yeah, so I actually like this idea. I think the more conference games, in my opinion, every league, you should play every team in your league home and away. Ideally, in a perfect world, that's what would happen. Right now we only have that in the Big 12, and it doesn't really matter because Bill Self and Kansas dominate the Big 12 anyway. But I would love to see a true round robin in the ACC, the Big 10, the Pac-12, the SEC. I think that way you get – not that the conference championships we get now are not valid, but it would just make – it would take out any doubt of who the best team was over the conference season. So I kind of like it. You'd start the conference season a little earlier, but I think the kick-on effect could potentially be that, you have, obviously you have fewer non-conference games, but then that means that you aren't playing, the Sisters of the Poor, the School of the Blind in November and December games that really don't mean anything. At the end of the day, no one wants to go and see a D1 team beat up on, a SMEAC team. It's just not. The players probably don't really get up for it. The fans, the environment in the gyms really isn't that great. And, I would much rather see Indiana, Kentucky play. I'd much rather see Indiana and Arizona play. I'd much rather see Kentucky and Kansas play, or one of these big programs have a home and home with Gonzaga or Wichita State, or one of these quote unquote mid-majors that aren't really mid-majors anymore. I would love to see more matchups like that, and maybe have 5 to 10 non-conference games and then extend those conference seasons out, rather than have a couple of big games, whether it be the Big Ten ACC Challenge and then some rivalry games, and then you play 5 to 7 games against small teams. I think that it could be two ways. You could see coaches really rely on those big non-conference games, or you could see a bunch of low-level teams that no one wants to see, and without actually putting the idea into implementation, we will never see what that looks like. But I would like to think in a perfect world that more conference games would mean better non-conference schedules.
Well, I know you're a huge Mississippi Valley State fan, and you love seeing them play some of the top dogs.
I do enjoy Mike Davis's annual trip to Bloomington because Mike Davis is a great guy. But if I never saw him in Bloomington again in a non-conference game, it wouldn't break my heart.
Wouldn't break your heart. All right, yeah, no, I think you brought up kind of the main point of the conference expansion in terms of games. The round robin's great, but it's either going to go one of two ways with the non-conference schedule. Either teams are going to, cut off some of those cupcake games, or they're going to cut off some of the main conference, non-conference games and say, hey, I don't want to play the Big Ten ACC Challenge because we're going to have, so many opportunities in the Big Ten Conference that we can get big wins, and I'd rather kind of prepare the team for that instead of preparing them for this early season game. Ryan, what are your thoughts on the conference expansion? Do you think they should do it or kind of leave it where it is?
Well, I wish they would have done it 5 years ago so we wouldn't have to sit through 5 non-conference of Tom Crean scheduling cupcake after cupcake, because it was into the 4th game against just a trash team, and we would just be like, where is the conference? I can't deal with this anymore. But now for our sake, Archie's going to fix that non-conference and make it tougher. But I definitely love the possibility of expanding the Big Ten because conference games are always fun. They always mean something, even if it's maybe not Rutgers, because it's still Rutgers. But I love watching any conference game. If it's IU versus Penn State, I'll get up for it. Always excited for Big Ten games, and they're always fun. So I would definitely love to see that happen. And like Duncan was saying earlier, they'd ideally play every team twice, home and home. But that probably wouldn't be able to happen with how big the Big Ten is. But I'd be all for that expansion.
Sean, what are your thoughts on this conception and possible change?
I mean, I like it personally. I think my solution to this is you just get rid of Rutgers, Penn State, and who am I?
Rutgers,
Penn State, and
Dahl
Nebraska.
gets up for those Penn State games.
No, but you get
rid
of those 3 schools, and then you do it like they do in football, where they have to go independent and they have to schedule their own games with random opponents and all that. So then the Big Ten can do a home and home at every Big Ten team and play each other twice. That's the perfect solution. They should consider doing that, because then our plan would be it would work then.
Well, I'd like to retract my statement on the getting up for Penn State. I'll get up for the Penn State games at Assembly Hall, but at the Bryce Jordan Center, I don't want to watch a basketball game where there's 100 fans at it.
Wait! I'm confused. You don't like it when Stephen Barto's the environment here is insane. I can't believe that. It's so loud here.
As soon as the word Penn State came out of his mouth, I was like, how can I get Stephen Barto into this conversation?
Stephen Barto if he could only call games at the Bryce Jordan Center, I think he would do it because he loves that environment. It's the best one in the Big Ten. Just ask him.
The Mike Miller tweet where it's OG Anunoby's injured, yet the kid who's screaming into the microphone is unharmed. I loved it. Here, I'm gonna bust only this idea for you guys.
Oh no.
Here is what they should do. Make the conference schedules for both the ACC and Big Ten, make them bigger. But if the committee cares more about quality over quantity, only play once a week during the non-conference. Play top 100 team every Saturday or Friday or whatever, instead of playing twice or 3 times a week against these really not very good teams. Play less non-conference games, but play higher quality non-conference games. And that way you have the week to practice and get your team ready for what is the regular season in conference play. What are your thoughts?
I agree that in a perfect world, I think that is the model that would happen. my question is what externality off of this is the problem? And I think that a lot of these are big payday games that these smaller schools get. And what are the knock-on effects of a Mississippi Valley State not playing at Assembly Hall? They get paid a lot to play that game. Do they not have a women's water polo team now because IU doesn't play that game? No, I use women's water polo as an example because it's kind of absurd, but it's the example, like the knock-on effects here, and that I think that the NCAA at that point is in a tough spot because you are trying to get these schools, they're trying to get those budgets to be to be a break even so that you can have these women's water polo or men's equestrian or different sports like that, thanks to Title IX. And I think that that's something that you also have to take into account, that these payday games, while they are boring for everyone involved, both the athletes and the spectators, I think that they're kind of a necessity that we will never truly get rid of.
That is true. It does kind of bring a little bit of balance to some college athletic programs. Sean or Ryan, do you have anything to add in here?
Yeah, just kind of going along with the scheduling and talking about the NCAA a little bit. Supposedly, the NCAA came out and said that they will, for this upcoming season, they will be placing a greater. The direct quote from the NCAA is, effective with 2017-2018 season, team sheets will place greater emphasis on where games are played rather than the ranking of each opponent. So it looks like road wins are going to be huge for teams on the bubble come tournament time, and it's going to play a huge factor into seeding this year.
I think IU should go up to Fort Wayne and play those guys. That seems like a road game.
That's a raucous environment.
90% IU fans.
90% IU fans, but it's a tough place to play.
Well, while we're talking about Big Ten, the last kind of scheduling thing I wanted to bring up, the Big Ten tournament is going to be a week early this year. So it'll be, the weekend. It'll end the Sunday before Selection Sunday. So those teams are going to have a week without games. Do you think this is going to affect Big Ten teams? I heard a prediction that some team is going to get knocked out early in the tournament, and then their coach is going to flip out saying that it was the week break. What do you think is going to happen with this week break? I know there are rumors that some teams may have like a close scrimmage or some sort, something kind of like along that line, or some teams are just going to practice. We'll go to Duncan. What are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, I think it kind of falls into the camp of something that really doesn't have that much of a negative impact, but will definitely get scapegoated if a team does lose early in the tournament. It doesn't have an impact on Gonzaga, who finishes like on the Tuesday or the Wednesday. Wichita State has made it made to the Final Four and deep in the tournament, finishing up on that Sunday before. So I really think that, I'm going to enjoy watching games at Madison Square Garden. I think it's a lot to do about nothing. I think the real problem is that it starts the season earlier rather than, when it finishes. But I think that in the end will have an impact on performance in the NCAA tournament. Probably not. I think that if the impact it will have is more on the committee, because sometimes when you see on that selection on that championship week, you see teams that are on the bubble early in that week, they just are constantly sliding down because we have humans naturally just have that recency bias, and if you're not seeing those teams up until Selection Sunday, you might not remember, that Indiana was a team that was worthy of getting that bubble spot, or insert potential bubble Big Ten team
Rucker.
here. No. Rucker. Well, I'm going to, if you can quote me on this, Rucker will not make the tournament this year. I'm willing to go out on a limb and say that. But I think that, if you see any impact, it will be in the selection of Big Ten teams more than the actual performance. Because, when you have good momentum, I think you'll be fine. And sometimes it's nice, where would IU be if they got 2 weeks in between the Big Ten tournament and the first round against Chattanooga 2 years ago, and Robert Johnson is able to rest his ankle? Does he play against North Carolina? Obviously, we're never going to know the answer to that, but I think that's just an example of, sometimes rest is a good thing, and a lot of people are focusing on the bad right now. I think that it will be fine. My problem is that it pushes the season start earlier, but hey, that's life. You're not going to be able to change that. But I think that at the end of the day, it'll probably be neutral more than positive or negative.
Ryan, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, regardless, 3/4 of the All Hail King Archie squad will be rolling up there for that, so that'll be cool.
Nah, make it 100%. I'll be going there with Iowa.
We're gonna have all 4 members of this podcast in Madison Square Garden for the Big Ten tournament.
I'll get press seats for the games.
We'll have a live podcast talking about the big.
When Archie Miller hoists his first Big Ten tournament title, I can't wait for that live pod.
Well, this is going to be awesome because
my column
because IU might make it past the first round this year for the first time in like 35 years.
Well, Cameron Chapman has transferred, so
wait! Don't forget, IU did get the first round bye 2 years ago, so technically they did make it past the first round. I don't
want to hear these technicalities, but like
I'm just speaking straight facts,
No, I understand that you only speak facts. But,
exactly.
But it's regarding the week early thing. It has its positive and negatives. Like if say like you've mentioned with the IU team from 2 years ago, that was tough to watch with all the injuries, and like if they were to have a week off, then they would have been able to rest up. And like you said, who knows what would have happened. But we don't like to think about that year. But moving forward, so you'd either have time to rest as a positive, or like you were saying, there's like that recency bias where you could kind of forget about those teams because you weren't watching them play like just that weekend in their conference tournament.
See, the simple solution is then just win the conference tournament. Then you don't have to worry about recency bias.
That's fair.
All right,
I respect.
All right,
that.
Sean, what are your thoughts on the Big Ten tournament schedule change just for this year?
Well, I mean, I'm kind of torn on it because, I mean, I could see the negative and positive impact of it. But, I mean, just from my viewpoint, I feel like sometimes with the selection show, especially this year, maybe the committee kind of got – I don't know how to phrase it, but I feel like they just kind of put Michigan – like they were like a 7 seed or something like that? They just got pushed into the – they just got put into the 7 seed, and really there was no – really preparation for them, I guess, like where to put them or anything, because it was so soon. I mean, I don't know how much that has to do with anything, but that's what I'm kind of thinking, because, I mean, the championship ends, like an hour or two before the selection show begins. So, I mean, they still have to calculate, like, I mean, that game can mix up the whole tournament, which is a big thing, and could screw up some of the seeding. So, I mean, like I said, with the USA coaching thing, there's really no perfect way to fix it or anything. I'm not opposed to it being earlier, but I wouldn't be shocked if it stays the same either.
Well, why not just start the conference tournaments a day early? Finish up all those games on Saturday night, and then think of all the airtime you could have from Sunday morning of all the debates back and forth. I think that if you have all those tournaments finishing up on Saturday rather than Sunday, you kind of set it up for TV better, and it makes the committee's job easier, because then they don't have to make any last second shuffling. They can say, okay, we know that these schools are our automatic qualifiers, and then go from there. And so then, I mean, does that change anything? Maybe not, but that gives them a little more time to make decisions rather than having like 5 different brackets that we keep hearing, that the committee has all these different brackets, when in reality it's just more convoluted and it can be much simpler.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, because, I mean, you could just push everything back one day, and just give that whole time for people like us to give our hot takes of the tournament and
exactly
some bracketology.
But like I said earlier, Sean, this is once again assuming that the NCAA thinks about something logically. And, I think we've all had enough experience to say that the NCAA will never make the most logical decision.
That's true. That's very true. We'll suggest that to them.
Yeah.
We'll suggest it to Jerry Meyer to then bring it to the NCAA.
Remember, most of us are going pro on something other than sports, quote unquote.
All right, I love it. And on that tremendous quote, we are going to go through one last time and do final thoughts, comments, takes, just to kind of wrap it up. Duncan, Ryan, and I are going to be back with a podcast next week, and we have a special guest that has agreed to come on with us, so that shall be a lot of fun. Just keep that in mind. So we'll start off with Duncan with his closing thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, we have 115 days, I think it was, at the counter. That's really all that matters to me. I'm after watching the recruitments this week. It's got me fired up, as if I wasn't already fired up to see Archie and the squad in action. I'm just ready for the season to start at this point. It's like, can we just? I think if we just start the season now, then we can get all the non-conference games we want. We can have all of the conference games you want, and then we don't have any issues. So I think that's really what it comes down to. We just need to make it a 12-month season, and then we don't have these issues.
12-month season. I love it. Hot take, Duncan Hensley. All right, Dahl, closing thoughts. I know Dahl's got some hot take burning up.
Oh, I don't know about that, but Duncan mentioned the 115 days, and I'm glued to my Twitter feed looking for that College Pride Press countdown tweet every day. And there's like 3 different countdowns I have going on right now. One of them is till we get back in B-Town. The other till I turn the big 2-1, and the other
hashtag nightmares, baby.
And the last is the college basketball countdown, and I would definitely say that the college basketball countdown is at the top of the list because I would be all for a 12-month season, as Dunkmaster Flex had mentioned.
Hey, it's no longer Dunkmaster Flex. It's J.D. Hensley. Got to get it right. You got to be up with the times. Come on.
This guy switches nicknames more than anyone. But yeah,
updating your Twitter feed.
He spends more time in the sand than David Hasselhoff.
Oh yeah, yeah. This guy's a tool. But
hey, that wasn't me. Take that back.
But anyways, college basketball, we miss you. We know you're the greatest sport out there, and we'll see you soon.
Wow, so romantic, so heartfelt.
I know.
Sean, bring us home.
Yeah, I mean, I'm counting down the days as well. Checking my phone to see if Seth Davis retweets our countdown. Hopefully we can get him on a pod soon. Who knows? Or he'll give us a shout out on the CBS. But yeah, I mean, I've been counting down the days now for college basketball until I can visit Bloomington to see the Hawkeyes go up against the Hoosiers, which will be a fun game. Visit my College Pride Press boys. So there we go. Can't wait.
My question is, would it be bigger if Rothstein changed his countdown to the College Pride Press one, or if College Pride Press got the shout out on like CBS or ESPN or any of those networks? I think the Rothstein one would take the cake.
Rothstein,
the Rothstein
without a
one
doubt.
would definitely take the cake. All right, well, thank you for joining us on this crazy roller coaster edition of College Pride Press. I hope we kept you entertained for a little bit here. Thanks to Sean, Ryan, and Duncan for joining me. This is a loaded cast, so we're definitely going to have to get the 4 of us back together on another pod as the off-season weans down and the regular season gets ready to roll. Thanks, gents, and have a good night.